Hi, everybody. Welcome. Welcome, welcome. For those of you who are tuning in on our Facebook Live, um, super excited to have you here. Super excited to learn with all of you this morning. An exciting panel on talking about justice. We're so grateful for all of you who are joining us today with our panelists, and our team was really crucial on organizing this great event today for all of you. So we deeply appreciate you taking the time this morning to learn with all of us. And I'll hand it over to my colleague Emma to get us started with introducing our amazing panelists for today.
Great. Thank you, Eddie, and thank you everyone for being here. I will go ahead and start with Darren Mack. He is an activist, advocate, and organizer. He is co-director at Freedom Agenda, a member-led organization dedicated to organizing people and communities directly impacted by incarceration to achieve decarceration and system transformation. We also have here Victor Pate, who is a formerly incarcerated person and healing survivor of solitary confinement, co-director of the HALTsolitary Confinement Coalition, chairman of the NYC Chapter National Action Network Second Chance Committee, one of the lead coordinators of the NYC Vote in Jails and Civic Engagement Coalition, member of the legislative advocacy team of the New York for Full Restoration of Voting Rights Coalition, as well as being cross-connected with a host of criminal justice, decarceration, and advocacy coalitions. And finally, we are joined by Ellie Weinbach, who is an experiential educator for the Jewish people and strives to manifest his love of the environment and Jewish tradition in a deeply connected world. He worked for Hazon for 3 years, including as Jaffe, Jewish Outdoor Food, Farming, and Environmental Education Fellow before transitioning to graduate level Rabbinical and Environmental Studies. He will graduate from Yeshivat Chovei Torah this June. So with that, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. I will go ahead and just start with the first question we have, which is the current justice system just? Does anybody want to start us out?
I'm gonna jump right in. I
Great.
think that is a misnomer when you're talking about justice. So I'm quite sure you've heard the new terminology, criminal legal system, and that term is being amplified more and more and more as we begin to find out how many thousands of people are being railroaded, how many thousands of people have been found wrongfully convicted, and how, more importantly, disproportionately people of color are incarcerated in our prisons and jails and detention centers. So when we talk about justice, there is no justice. Justice for us and justice for them. There are two systems of justice, and justice is not across the board, and justice is not fair. I don't know about justice being blind, but I can tell you that this is not a justice system because justice is not applied for all people in all circumstances. That's my story, and I'm gonna stick by it.
Yeah, I guess I could chime in, build off, what Victor stated in regards to the question. I think we all believe, we all want our criminal justice system to be just, and we all believe that it should be just. But as Victor mentioned, the way it has been operating, over, over decades, it has been unjust in so many ways. Like what got me into advocacy was learning about just a relative of mine, George Stinney Jr. I got a letter from a cousin. It was a cutout newspaper article about George Stinney Jr. They was actually making a film about his case, and George Stinney Jr. He in 83 days he was arrested, convicted, and executed. He got the electric chair, falsely convicted, falsely executed. He was 14 years old. And when I learned about this story, it happened a long time ago. Like, wow, what type of system do we have that can allow such a tragic situation to occur like this? And as Victor mentioned, for far too many Black and brown and poor people especially in our country, but in our city as well. There's been a lot of injustice that's been happening, within the legal system than it has been just when it comes to those communities, and like to I guess, like, in the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., he stated that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And unfortunately, in this day, even though that case happened a long time ago, people throughout our city and the country have experienced an injustice with the system. And that's why we organize, and that's why we advocate the work, so we can have a more fair and just system. But for far too many people experience it, it has been unjust.
Thank you. Is there a way to move past private prisons? Victor, would you like to start?
Sure. So yeah, just don't build them. Don't fund them. Don't build them. And when we're talking about another form of slavery, because prisons is modern day slavery, we can't get away from that. And I always have to go back to the historical point when you talk about incarceration, which is actually enslavement by another name, right? And if you're talking about prison industrial complex, it's all about making money, right? And when we talk about private prisons that are owned by these millionaires, and they run by their own rules. There is no oversight, there's no monitoring, and they just do just about whatever they want. There should be legislation that disallows private prisons, number one. Okay. And if you don't create the platform for them to build on, you won't have private prisons. So what does that take? That takes advocacy, activism, right? Legislation, people who care about other human beings, the care that people receive while they are in a custody status. But more importantly, because you mentioned about private prisons, right? I just really can't fathom how people are allowed to even build a prison that has no systems of accountability. Okay, and they can just do willy-nilly whatever they want, make their own rules, and they're accountable to no one. So how does that happen? Through policies that are passed and made by the powers that be, the good old boy and the good old girl network. So I think that when you're talking about doing away with it, don't even let it happen. Don't even create a platform for it to happen. Number one. So that's basically my overall answer.
Thank you. Darren, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I kind of echo, the prison industrial complex in our country is, probably the largest, in the world. But when it comes to like private prisons, I think people need to understand that's a very small fraction of the criminal justice system when it comes to like jails and prisons and ICE detention centers, within our country. State prisons is probably about like over a million people in the state prison system. Local jails about 500,000. Then there's like federal prison and jails. And the private prison sector is like a very small fraction of that. And I think we can move past it because there's been, over, for some time, there's been pushback against, private prisons, states, because they want to divert taxpayer money from investing into these private prisons. They, instead of working on decarceration efforts and housing, mental health, and those things, they usually just hand it off to private corporations to operate the prison, so that it comes out of taxpayer dollars. But I think especially for New York and New York City, I think we've been doing a really good job to move away from, because not every state has a private prison. So and I think more and more people would rather have our taxpayer dollars to go to the things that actually provides public safety, like housing, like mental health, like community-based programs and services in our cities, rather than utilizing our tax dollars to jails and prison. Like right now, and New Yorkers pay New York, people in New York City, we pay over $556,000 a year to keep one person on Rikers Island for a year. One person, over $500,000 a year to keep one person detained on Rikers Island for a year. And I'm sure that people think we could actually be doing better things with those resources than incarcerating people who remind you who are mostly overwhelmingly held pretrial. They haven't had their day in court. Some people stay on Rikers for a year, 2-3 years or more. And half of the population currently right now on Rikers Island have people who have mental health issues, mental health challenges, and they're not getting those services, in their communities where I think it would be a better fit, use of our resources and taxpayer money.
Great, thank you. Is rehabilitation the goal of the justice system? Victor, I saw you smile.
And I really wanted to bet Darren hit the first ball, but you called my name, so now you put me on the spot. So, rehabilitation has never been the goal of incarceration. It has always been a punishment paradigm. So you are judged guilty of a crime, and as a result, the answer for your being convicted is to send you out of your community, thousands of miles away from your community, your family, and your loved ones, right? And once you get to this facility, if you will, right, the opportunities for redemption or transformation, you know what I'm saying? The design of the prison industrial complex is, like I say, always about making money. Prison industrial complex is about making money. And by having people incarcerated, each body is worth X amount of dollars. I think, and believe me, my numbers might be a little bit off. If I'm not mistaken, it's like anywhere between 85,000 to 100,000 plus dollars to incarcerate people in the state correction facility. And if people have health issues, and Darren had pointed out, that doubles and triples in most cases, right? However, the opportunity for redemption and transformation is not presented, right? It's not presented because I know for myself that my decision to transform came from myself and not from what the prisons had available. And myself, along with other colleagues, people who are incarcerated, we actually designed programs that were geared towards reintegration. We did that, not the state. We did that, okay, with no money, okay? So these billions and billions of dollars that these institutions have, they could be using those monies for reintegration, reentry, transformation, mental health, housing, and all those other things that go along with a person once your sentence is over. But no, it's not designed for a person to transform their lives. They may have some program, but they don't have enough substantive program. And I've seen over the course of the years, that I've been home, how they took programs away, especially when you're talking about education, because education is one of the key factors of a person coming home and be able to successfully reintegrate and successfully be integrated within the work market to educate. They took those programs out. So there's very few educational programs well, let me just say it like this here. During my period of time, when I was doing incarcerated, you could come out with PhDs, okay? And people were coming home with PhDs, and guess what? You never see them again. And they became program directors, and they designed programs to help formerly incarcerated people in the reintegration process. The prison industrial complex is not built on transformation. It's built on a punishment paradigm. I'll leave it there. Keep moving for my colleagues.
Yeah, I don't know if Eli want to chime in at some point, but but uh, I think like the history of like prisons in our country is, it's it's beginning with like the Quakers to come up with a system, the penitent system, penitentiary. It's probably started out like to rehabilitate people, that may have caused some harm in the community. And then the Quakers kind of sort of going in a different direction early, and they moved away from, supporting the prison system that eventually evolved to what we have now. But it has changed away from that idea to like penitence and rehabilitation. It changed a very long time ago, and like I think we could probably check like some data and studies that show that the reincarceration rate, what they say the recidivism rate of corrections in our country is like over 60%. More than half of the people are reincarcerated. So if it was a correctional system, a rehabilitation system, then the number would be much, much lower than that high number. And if we had a school that had a 68% dropout, I think we would be making some changes. So that says, so the same thing should apply to our criminal legal system, jails and prisons. If we have this such high recidivism rate, why aren't these changes being made to like actually be effective? So we won't have reincarceration and recidivism. So as Victor said, they at this moment for a very long time, for far too long, our prisons and jails and the correctional system has failed in regards to um, um, you know what they say they're supposed to do: rehabilitate and correct and transform.
Yes, thank you. I am going to move on to a question about faith. And so the question is, how does your faith ground you in your work? And we can start with Ellie. I want to ask specifically, what are your thoughts on justice through a Jewish lens?
Yeah, so Judaism and justice can go, they obviously go hand in hand in a lot of different ways. And there's some very explicit verses, which people like to quote, and that's good. I think what I want to mention in this context is that for me, as an Orthodox Jew, I place a high value on halacha, which is sort of the everyday rules of how you walk through life. And that, for Orthodox Jews, basically guides everything they do. And the main thing that I want to remind people is that a codex, a book, one of these books of halacha, of like that guide you and how to do your life, cannot be just. Justice is something that people do. People can be just or not as they're applying what they're reading. And in order to apply correctly, people need to be looking at the values, and it's very clear from the sources throughout Jewish history that we're focused on something much more than just crime and punishment. We're focused on values like teshuvah, right, which is return and repentance, something that the rabbis really believed was possible, even for really anyone. There are stories about Eliezer ben Dordaya, right? This was a sage who lived, back in ancient times, and the Talmud talks about how he did every degenerate crime possible, and with his last breath, he did teshuvah. He returned, right? And he was accepted. He was accepted to heaven. And these stories aren't meaningless. There's two things. There's the halacha. There's like the what you should do, and then there's all the value that you're supposed to use as a lens for interpreting it. And I think that there's been a lot of damage done to justice by way of people who are hyper fixated on the letter of the law as read in a book without any context. And if you just look at the way that rabbis throughout history have interpreted law, you'll see values of compassion, you'll see values of change, you'll see values of inclusion, really centering people as opposed to the book itself. I think that that's where justice shows up for me in Judaism. For me, is through the power of people who are taking a creative look at how to make sure that what we're saying is actually in line with our values and not just what's coming out of a book.
Thank you. So I want to hear from either Darren or Victor about how your spirituality defines justice for you. Does anyone want to start?
Yeah, I think Eli.
Good.
Eli.
Good. You went for the hook. I'm glad you.
He summed it up for me, like what he spoke about. Eli spoke about like the faith in people, and that's what's been like fueling my spirit. The people who've been advocating and organizing for justice, like one of our members, her name is Anna, and she, her son was on Rikers Island for over 5 years, pre-trial, mind you, just like waiting, going back and forth to court, and because of, and she was like, something is not right about that, and she got involved in advocacy and organizing around the campaign to close Rikers, and like seeing mothers like Anna, Tamara, one of our members at Freedom Agenda, her son had a mental health issue, and because of the conditions, the traumatic conditions, he ultimately took his own life, Rikers Island, and she became a staunch advocate against solitary confinement in New York City, which was actually passed by City Council last month, and so it's the people that feeds my spirit, that keep me going when I feel like, man, we might have lost this fight, but those members and those family members, those New Yorkers and allies who know that it's a struggle, and justice is a struggle, and sometimes it's there's so many stories, and just my faith in the people that's been doing this work is what keeps my spirit going.
Thank you for sharing. Victor, do you have anything to add?
Really do. So thank you so much for that. It's a good question. So for me, as a Muslim, and my faith and my understanding, right, I can say for a fact that once humankind got away from God's words and corrupted God's meaning, is where we went off the cliff, right? So in Islam, two things guide me: Shariat, which is Islamic law, and the Sunnah, which is the practices of Prophet, peace be upon him, right? And how he conducted himself, and how he treated people, and how he encouraged humankind to treat each other based on God's revelation and words as to how we as human beings, what our responsibility is, not only to self, but to other human beings. And it's always about justice and fairness and equality and charity and treating people, equally, and helping where you can help, and not taking advantage of people's plight in life. That's a duty. It's a sacred duty. And, I'm listening to Eli. It's like I just started, my armpit started sweating because I'm hearing them talking, and I'm like, oh yeah, go ahead, give it to him. But I understand that. So for me, I believe, and I took my shahada, which is basically my commitment as a Muslim, not while I was inside, but while I was outside, right? And having opportunity to practice the Islamic faith, but not only also to have opportunities to study other religions, because in Islam it teaches us to study other religions and not just follow blindly one thing. In order for you to fully encompass God's words and understanding, you have to have an understanding of other religions and how we're really not that much different from each other. It's just a matter of how we ibadah, which in Islam means worship. You know what I'm saying? But it's just so similar. So for me, my faith number one, keeps me grounded in the work and belief in that if you continue and you persist and you are diligent, eventually you will be successful in your goals. So for me, and of course, Darren kind of sort of like mentioned people and, the work that we've been doing and successes that we have, you know what I'm saying? It's the fuel that keeps me doing what I'm doing. It keeps me hopeful that we are making a difference, small incremental places and stuff. But I think it's that the continuity of doing what we're doing, knowing that if we keep on going, eventually we'll be successful in our endeavors, and that we, the people, can change our conditions.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing. So I wanted to next ask, do you agree with the death penalty? Darren, would you like to go?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, the current system that we have in place, there's been a lot of executions that have, we come to find out, oh, this person was innocent. And every state is different in this country, and New York, thank goodness, doesn't have it. And I believe that redemption. I believe at some point people ultimately could be redeemed at some point, and to like cut a person's life off, I'm definitely not a support of the death penalty, especially by the state, because there's been a lot of cases. It's been too many cases, far too many cases, where the death penalty, someone was executed and it turned out, it was wrong, or it wasn't beyond a shadow of a doubt, or even the method of there's been a lot of questions around the method of execution that people deemed as torturous, and yeah, so that's something, even incarceration to some degree is like what they call death by incarceration. People just die, after 20, 30, 40 years. I think we should be looking at other places in the world, like who's doing it better, like what justice system is more just and more fair. Like some more developed countries don't have like life in prison. They chose to take a different direction and invest in, in communities, and invest in, housing and mental health. So that's a very controversial issue in our country, and there are various opinions about it. But personally, for me, one life, make a mistake on one life, man, it's like that's just too much, and I think we could find better ways to hold people accountable, of course, and to administer justice, and that way I don't see how that the death penalty could bring healing to a person who's been harmed, from my perspective.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Victor, do you have any thoughts?
Yes. So thank you so much for that question. And definitely, emphatically, I am totally against the death penalty. How dare humankind decides a person's life or death? How dare humanity take that responsibility on? Life and death belongs to God. Okay, so now you're gonna put yourself in God's place and gonna decide who lives and who dies. Totally, I'm totally against that. And Darren mentioned. So, what does it do to take a person's life, right, in retribution for perhaps them taking somebody else's life? Does it fix the circumstances? No, it does not. Does it change anything that has happened? Does it? Darren used the word healing. Okay. Uh, I mean, there's a lot of different connotations that we could put on that, but to even, what I'm saying, figure that, oh, you're evening up the scoreboard because maybe this person took somebody's life or was the cause of somebody losing. So we're going to take your life. We're evening up the scoreboard. That goes back to the retribution and punishment paradigm. But how does that even measure up for peace of mind or solace? I just can't make the connection how that even equates with justice. You know what I'm saying? In terms of society, saying it's justice that we executed this person because they killed somebody. That's justice. No, that's humankind's justice, which is definitely misapplied. And here we go again, disproportionately applied to people of color and indigenous people. That's the systemic justice that people often places this connotation on. But what does it do for society at large? I think it does nothing and serves no purpose.
Thank you for sharing. Ellie, do you have anything from the Jewish perspective to add about this?
Yeah, I think the thing that I want to bring in on this is a piece of rabbinic literature that I heard recently, which says that the rabbis say that a court which kills once in every 7 years is considered a killer court. And then there's a interesting character who comes in and says, his name is Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah. And he says it's once every 70 years is called a killer. And he feels that the job of the wise people in power is to do everything they can to keep a court from killing. The whole point of all your knowledge is to figure out how to make sure that a person is not dying. I think it's also really interesting to think about who that rabbi specifically was. Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah was brought into a position of power at an extremely young age. He was 17 and he was wise beyond his years, and he was actually brought in because his predecessor, the rabbinic authority before him, had lost their job because of some political issues. When they brought in a young, clear-eyed person, not in the pocket of anybody, no political leanings one way or another, someone who's just reading the sources and trying to figure out what is the right thing to do, that was Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah. And he said we should basically not be administering the death penalty. If we are, we're doing the wrong thing.
Thank you for sharing. So our next question is redemption possible in our current system?
Yeah, I could tackle that. From my own personal experience, I can say, and for what I've seen, like myself, I was incarcerated at the age of 17. I take full responsibility, and I served, almost 20 years in the New York State prison system, and like during early in my, incarceration, I've seen, like, it was a journey. I've seen things like the story of about my cousin George Stinney Jr. was like, man, that made me think about the criminal legal system, like how it operates and why this injustice occurred. And then seeing people who I've seen like transform had like a huge impact on me, and I've seen it, and then not necessarily like just the incarceration, actually help them transform, because some people, unfortunately, it takes them longer. Just like, some people, they go to different schools and stuff, it just take them longer to complete the degree, whatever. But they took upon themselves. They made a choice, conscious choice to change. They understand. They hold themselves accountable. Understand the harm that they may have caused, and took the best of from what they see from amongst people to change ourselves. Yeah, it's definitely, I believe, definitely redemption is possible. But I think redemption is possible. In the communities, a lot of people just don't fall out of the sky into the prison. It's people who's going through life challenges. Well, it's like right now, like a lot of people are being incarcerated in New York City for having mental health crisis, and the response is probably usually not the most appropriate. They find themselves incarcerated. People, haven't been diagnosed, and until they get incarcerated, like, they had a mental health issue, and a lot of people go through a lot of challenges. So I think, a lot of, we as a city, as a nation, need to be looking at these root causes that's driving and feeding incarceration in our country, and really try to tackle those things. And but yes, I do believe that people, Even people, who may have caused harm sometimes, like the story that was just mentioned earlier, the person did something good at the end. That's a story of redemption as well.
Thank you. Victor, do you have anything to add?
Really quickly, I think that redemption is possible. And in order for us to get there, we have to create the platform for redemption. As I spoke about earlier, that, transformation has to happen within yourself internally first. And once that process is done, then you have to have resources and a platform for that to actually happen and occur and for it to, manifest itself. And also, the additional piece to the redemptive part is that you have to create policies that will actually make redemption possible. And unfortunately, we are not there yet. We're working on it though. Like clean slate, that's a a component of redemption, so to speak. Removing the barriers to people successfully reentry. You know what I'm saying? Systemic barriers that are in place. Once you go to prison, you got a felony on your record. You're branded for life, just like a slave. Okay, those barriers have to be removed. And that means it's going to take legislation, it's going to take people, and it's going to take a lot of different moving parts. So yeah, redemption is necessary, but there's some components that go along with that redemptive process.
Thank you. This next question is, in your opinion, is solitary confinement immoral or justified? And does anybody want to start us out?
Definitely don't want Victor to start. You don't want me to start. Darren, go for it, brother. Go for it, brother. I gotta fall back.
I'll pass that to you, Victor, because Victor's been a leading advocate in New York City and New York State around this issue. So I'll defer to Victor on that one.
Okay, but I'm gonna really be quick in consideration of my other panelists, so I definitely am not going to eat up all the time. So definitely, solitary confinement is torture. It is immoral. It is inhumane. Our UN repertoire, then UN repertoire said that anybody that's held in any solitary confinement beyond 15 days is considered torture. In New York State, people prior to the passage of the HALT bill in 2021, people were being able to held in solitary confinement indefinitely. Albert Woodfox, one of the Angola Three, was held in solitary confinement for 43 years. That is inhumane. Talking about what happens to a person in solitary confinement, transformation, mental health issues, psychological damage, deprivation of social engagement, which we're social human beings. We need interaction. And as a, healing, always put the word healing person from solitary confinement after being home for 25 years, I have collateral damage and still the effects of my time when I was in solitary confinement. So that's the end. And your most inhumane, one of the most inhumane things you could do to a person is have put them in solitary confinement. There is no justification for a person to be placed in solitary confinement to correct their behaviors because it don't do nothing but deteriorate behaviors. It does nothing for the safety of the correctional facility. It does nothing for the safety of our community because guess what? Oftentimes people are released directly from solitary confinement long term. What do you think that person, how do you think that person is going to be when they've been deprived, sensory deprived the opportunity to interact with other human beings, and you release them back to the community without any transformative services in place? What do you think is going to happen? A recipe for disaster. So yes, it is inhumane, it serves no purpose. And what about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that nobody should be tortured? Nobody should be treated inhumanely. What about our constitutional Eighth Amendment? What about that? You all know what that say. I don't have to repeat it. And here we go, right? The UN resolution that is now known as the Mandela Rule states that no one should be placed in any long-term solitary confinement. No one should be treated inhumanely. So what about that? Do we not respect those doctrines of our society? What are we living by when we allow this to continue to happen to our fellow humans? So definitely inhumane.
Thank you. Darren, did you want to add to that?
No, I think you summed it up.
Thank you. Ellie, anything?
I wouldn't dare add on to Victor, but I do want to say, in our tradition, God created people because God couldn't stand being alone, and I think that says a lot about how we're supposed to think about being with people and what it does to someone to deprive them of that.
Yes, thank you. Our next question is, how can we ensure safety and security without relying on prisons? Does anyone want
Yeah, it's a great question. So like, we all want safe communities, right? And I think some people are start to learn more and more that, that the safest communities are not the most police communities or the communities that have the most jails and prisons. They're the communities with the most resources, like in New York City, the communities that have the, first class quality schools, quality housing, quality hospitals, etc. These are resources and institutions that's that cities invest in, and those are usually are the most safest communities in our society. So I think that's exactly how we move away from like investing in the criminal legal system, investing in jails and prisons, by actually investing in communities to build up those quality schools, hospital, housing, and different programs and services. And unfortunately, like here in New York City, the New York City Department of Correction has the highest DOC budget in the country, $2.7 billion a year with a B. Second to that is LA County, which has, I think it's like a little over $1 billion a year, but they have 3 times as many people in their system than New York has. And so we spend, and we all probably heard about Rikers Island in the news for the past, several years. Nothing had, we pay more money and gets the worst results out of our jail system. So that's why, advocates like myself and Victor and organizational partners and allies have been calling on the city to actually, redirect resources into the things that we know that bring safety to our communities. Like as I mentioned earlier, half the population of Rikers Island, about 3,000 people, have a mental health diagnosis. 19% of that population has a serious mental health diagnosis, meaning they have 2 or more diagnoses, challenges, illnesses. Why are we not, addressing that issue, to get people the mental health care that they should be getting, within the communities, so that's something we've been advocating for, in New York City. We're in budget season right now, and a lot of organizations, that's providing supportive housing and mental health are going to be, calling on our city elected officials to, we need to invest in things to close the pipelines that's feeding, our carceral system.
Thank you. Victor, do you have anything to add?
Actually, I'm going to take a seat this time and just short. Darren summed it up very well. Resources, education, and housing, mental health services. These are the type of things that keeps our community, alternatives to incarceration. Let me say it like that.
Absolutely. Thank you. The next question is, in your opinion, does the current parole system work to reinstate ex-offenders back into society?
I think I'm going to take a stab at that really quickly. So if you okay, let me say it like this. So when you're incarcerated, right, will supposedly pay your debt to society, right? And when you come out, you're supposed to be changed. Like I said, I'm gonna say this again: prison don't change you; you change yourself. So there's not that platform for that to happen. And if you do not have the appropriate substantive programs that are community related to keep a person connected and keep that continuum when a person becomes eligible for parole, and you don't appropriately prepare a person for reintegration, then there comes out a person that's been in jail for 20 years that's ill prepared for society and to deal with the different societal challenges. So I believe that our current parole system does not do that at all, because guess what? It's about making money. So yeah, you can get parole, but if you're not appropriately prepared to deal with the various challenges that you are going to face, psychologically, and I have to say this as a person myself, because I had to do therapy when I came home for a minute to kind of sort of like find my way and get my balance and get my direction in life. If you don't have those types of mental health services, and this is big. We keep, Darren says, a lot of people, we keep talking about mental health, mental health, mental health, mental health, how important and integral that is to a person's successful reentry. If you don't include that component, then like I say, a recipe for disaster. So what I think this current parole system, the way it operates, does not prepare a person for a successful reentry, because they want you to come back because you represent a dollar bill. And if you come back, you're worth more money to them. You know what I'm saying? So I think that this current system of parole is poor and needs great improvement. And they need to really, really, have a substantive program preparing people for reentry at the point of entry. Not wait 20 years down the line after they done 20 years and they get ready to go home in 6 months. Now you bum rush them and heap all these programs on. You cannot comprehend that. You can't actually implement the mechanisms of that reentry process. So you have to start reentry at the point of entry.
Thank you. Darren or Ellie, have anything to add to that? That's okay. Well, we can move on to the last question in hopes of leaving this off somewhat uplifting. What is a message of hope you have?
Oh, yeah, I guess I could get started with that one. So when it comes to Rikers Island, just a little context, Rikers Island is the last penal colony in the United States. Many people probably heard of Alcatraz, which closed decades ago, I think like 1963 or something like that. McNeil Island, which was a penal colony in our country, closed like in the early 2000s, leaving Rikers Island to be the last penal colony in the United States. It's 400 acres of land with 10 jails on there. 90% of the people detained there are held pre-trial, meaning they haven't seen their day in court, and they're mostly there because they can't afford to bail. There are some people there who are there because they might have like a city sentence for 1 year or less. Some people, a small percentage of people that have been convicted and serve a city sentence. But thanks to and we've probably heard all the stories of all the horrible things and the violence and brutality and deaths that's been coming out of Rikers Island in New York City over for several years now. And thanks to advocates, and family members who lost loved ones on Rikers Island, City Council passed a law in 2019 to close Rikers Island by 2027, and to going, because there's actually 14 jails in the New York City jail system. 10 of them are Rikers. There's one jail next to the court in Brooklyn, one in Queens next to the court, Manhattan, and then there's the Boat, which is adjacent to the Bronx. But so this law, this is established law, And it's not a legal responsibility for our city, but it's a moral imperative because nothing good comes out of Rikers Island. It's a stain on our city. It has a bloated budget that's operated on over $2.7 billion a year. People have, since this current administration took office, 30 people have lost their lives, and thousands of people with mental health and how they're suffering it. The good thing is that we have this law, we have organizations, the campaign to close Rikers Island is a coalition of over 180 organizations across our city that's been pushing the city to meet the deadline to close Rikers Island, and we could redistribute those resources into the things that communities need and actually bring safety in our communities. So that's kind of what I wanted to share.
Thank you. Ellie, do you have anything to add about this?
Yeah, this past high holiday season, I actually spent a little bit of time at Rikers, and I was with the congregants there, and I just, I was thinking about the verse that we were about the words that we were saying in the Rosh Hashanah and the High Holiday prayer, Ad Yom Moto Achakelo, right? That God says, until the day of death, I wait for the person to return to me. I got this sense as I was talking to the congregants there that they have feelings of contrition, feelings of sincerity, incredible self-awareness, and I was in so much pain at the fact that God is waiting for these people, and the only thing in the way is me, right? The only thing in the way is this island that we've put in between them and God. Yeah, after speaking with the people there, after praying with them, after eating with them, I have a lot of hope. These are people that if we do right by them, they'll do right by us.
Thank you. Victor, do you have anything, message of hope?
Yeah, I think that we, as we the people, it's going to be up to us, to really, transform this circumstances. And when we talk about Rikers Island, I'm on Rikers Island every month, twice a month, right? From a different coalition and work at it. I mean, if you hear about Rikers Island, you read about Rikers Island, you hear the muckety mucks talk about Rikers Island, but like Eli, when you go there and you see the dehumanization, the degradation, and the depression, I don't know, you cannot go there and not be affected. Let me say it like that. You know what I'm saying? And when you see our fellow human beings in this condition that it really hurts your heart, touches your soul. The old adage is that, society is judged by how we treat our most marginalized people. For those that are spiritually conscious, you know what you're going to be judged by. And humankind is going to be judged by those same things. And I can tell you, if we don't do something, to change the conditions, of our fellow human beings, and when the day that we return back to our God, and they ask you, what did you do with the life that I loaned you? Who did you help with the life that I loaned you? And you ain't got nothing to say. I just feel sorry for you. So I just think that it's up to us, the people, to change the conditions of our own people. And that's my message of hope, people.
Thank you very much. Well, I believe that was the final question, so I'm going to turn it over to Eddie to close us out.
Thank you so much, Emma. And I guess my last question from everybody here is, how do we stay in touch with both of y'all's amazing work? How can we support you? How do we keep in touch with knowing all the amazing things that both of you are working on, Darren and Victor?
Yeah, easily. So we could go people could just Google campaign-to-close-Rikers.org. That's campaign-to-close-Rikers.org, and sign up for our newsletter where you can, learn about upcoming, actions. There's so many ways that people can involve, whether it's like sign a petition, coming to a rally. Actually, March 8th at City Hall, we're going to be having a rally on the steps of City Hall ahead of this Committee on Criminal Justice hearing about the city budget and how our city is, has a bloated, Department of Corrections budget, and we need, to invest resources into, supportive housing and mental health and the things that we know that bring safety. So that's campaign-to-close-Rikers.org. Sign up for our newsletter.
Thank you for sharing that. Victor, how can we stay in touch with your work?
Yeah, so definitely. I mean, Darren and I like joined at the hips, so to speak. We're cross connected, but my particular camp coalitions is HALTsolitary, www.HALTsolitary.org. Come up and you'll see all the amazing things that we're doing. As Darren pointed out, we have a couple of rallies coming up that people can follow, join, and then as Darren say, sign petitions, forward the email. I think that even though we all have I guess capacities, things that we can do. So I think that each one of us can do something. If it's calling a person and say, hey, I heard such and such about this here, do further research. Oh, there's a rally over here. Oh, a matter of fact, did you see the online petition? Yeah, sign on, pass it on. I think that there's so many multiple things that people can do because everybody can't, be out, advocate, rally, what I'm saying, march in the rain, snow, in the blistering heat. Everybody can't do that. And we shouldn't all be doing that because this is a large systemic problem that I think has to be addressed from so many different platforms. So that's my word. So thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you, Ellie. Thank you, Emma, for combining to create such a powerful program and ask really hard conversations. I believe in a time right now where the world wants to divide us and make us feel like there isn't interfaith coalitions, like communities of color aren't coming together with different Jewish communities, different Muslim communities. Here we are together in community, talking about justice, looking to better our communities, and that is powerful. That is the illuminating light of hope that keeps us all together. Thank you so much to our speakers, to our moderators who helped this event come together and make possible. Thank you so much, all of you who are listening, and I hope you have a great day. Take care.